Commissioner Michael Copps. He joins us now from Washington. We're also joined by Bloomberg Media reporter Alex Sherman. Michael, what gives here?
Well, I think the expression by many Americans, hundreds of thousands of Americans against this deal is beginning to have some force here in Washington, D.C. I think the Commission is alive to the fact that this is not good for consumers. It has anti-competition, anti-consumer written all over it. It's talking a control of 40 to 50% of the high-speed broadband market. It's talking over a third of the video market. It's talking content distribution. It's just too much for people to absorb, particularly coming on the heels of the Comcast-NBCU merger, which we went through just a couple of years ago. Everybody thought we wouldn't be hearing from Comcast again for a while they absorbed that. And lo and behold, a couple of years later, they're back with another $45 billion deal. So I think the fact that it's taken this long is encouraging, but don't rush to the conclusion that the deal is dead. I mean, these companies are still putting the full-page ads in the New York Times and the Washington Post. They still have their legions of lobbyists and all in the FCC and Congress. So it'll be quite a battle between now and the closing bell. But I am more hopeful than I have been that this deal, which should be dead on arrival several months ago when I got to the FCC, will, in the final analysis, be turned down. I surely hope so.
Alex, what do you think?
I think there's two ways of looking at the rule changes from the FCC. One is what Michael just sort of said, which more or less says, hey, look, the FCC is taking a tighter look at this, and the various different rule changes we've seen. One, Obama coming out, now the FCC, Tom Wheeler, commissioner, saying we're going to change broadband to Title II, i.e. we're going to basically treat it as a utility other than price regulation, which he set aside. And two, bumping up the minimum broadband speeds. Both of those things have happened recently, and you could say, hey, look, it shows you that the next stage here, ... is that they're going to take a real hard look at this deal. The other way of looking at this is that they're setting up these stricter rules right now so that when they approve Comcast Time Warner Cable, they'll be able to say, look, we at least set the groundwork for a tighter regulation of broadband so that when we go ahead and accept this deal, we can at least say, yeah, Comcast owns 57% of high-speed broadband in the U.S., but now at least we've set a rule that says they've got to be net neutral. So I actually think it's probably the latter. The analysts that I speak to, certainly the people involved in this, they still expect this deal to go through, and I would say it would still be a surprise if it didn't.
You know, do you think that it's certainly
Michael?
History is on your side when you say that. I've been a member of Republican and Democratic commissions, and very few mergers have been stopped in their tracks, and they always come with conditions and concessions and things that sound good, ultimately don't get enforced too very well. So you can't put this at much more than a 50-50 deal right at this moment.
And let me add to that, too, that this deal is, in a way, particularly hard for regulators to nix because of the competition issue, whereas, say, AT&T T-Mobile, which was blocked by the DOJ, that was a clear case of a competitor being taken out of the market. Here, cable companies don't compete with each other, so they would need to nix it on some sort of public interest doctrine, like we don't want a large company owning all this much high-speed broadband because they could push back on, say, Netflix and Facebook and startup companies and not be net neutral. But when you come out and say, look, we're going to enforce net neutrality, again, to me, that seems to signal we're aware of the reasons why we might not accept this deal. We're going to lay the groundwork so that when we do accept the deal, you can't point to us and say, aha, all that broadband accumulation would have been bad for the country. Now the FCC can say, well, wait a second, we realized that, and that's why we did this before we accepted the deal.
This is also an important precedent, which is one of the concerns I think people have. What you're starting to see is the rise of internet as a factor in merger law. Because if we look at something like Staples and Office Max, Office Depot, that's really only going to be permitted because there's this new unseen competitor called Amazon.
Right.
And I think in this case here, there actually appears to me, as I understand it, almost no geographic overlap between where they actually provide cable. It's all about the internet.
Not only that, but you come out with new pay TV broadband products like this Dish Sling product that's just come out at the beginning of the year. It's a way to buy a smaller pay TV package over the internet only. That's now a competitor to your traditional pay TV product. So again, the conversation starts to steer away from television, and now maybe it's only on internet, one of 3 products that cable companies offer to residential clients by and large: telephone, internet, and TV. Now we're just focusing on one of the 3, maybe the most important, but you can put additional conditions on this deal, such as you say to Comcast you need to build out more high-speed internet in your combined Comcast-Time Warner Cable footprint. That might be a feather in Obama's cap, because he can say, look, we decided that we wanted to accept this deal. The FCC said okay, but we got more Americans access to high-speed broadband. I think that's what a lot of analysts have said. In other words, accept the deal, put conditions on it, we can get what we want. Nix the deal, we get nothing.
Mike, what do you think on the FCC's overall structuring of the internet at this point, and how much does this deal play into that?
First of all, let me say I don't think there are any sets of conditions that make this deal palatable to the public interest. It's just too much power in one company. You talk about competition, and maybe they don't compete in the local markets, and it's an interesting question why they don't compete against one another. That would be a good research project for people to look at right there. But look at the thing nationally. When you're taking that Comcast footprint and putting it into so many other localities, and you're having one company in control of 24 of the 25 largest markets, that's not anti-competitive. I think it really is. So on your other question of general direction of the Commission on the Internet, I think if the February 26th vote comes out as we hope it will, this is really the sign that there has been a wake-up call there, a realization of the importance of this infrastructure. When you get the President of the United States talking about it, when you get the American people talking about something as seemingly arcane as Title II regulation and knowing what that means that this has become a central issue for our country. And it should be, because the communications infrastructure is vital to us, not just economically, but from a democratic standpoint, a civic discourse standpoint, and the news and information that we get in order to govern ourselves.